Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Information Warfare Pavilion and our continuing speakers series for West 2023. It's 11:15. We started precisely on time because among the things that Admiral Perret has under his purview is the atomic clock at the U.S. Naval Observatory in Washington, D.C., the keeper of time for the world. Your phones and computers work because his team keeps the clocks working and keeps us all on time. I'm not going to go into a long introduction of Admiral Perret except to say he's back here in California where he's a native of Chico, Bachelor of Science degree in Physical Oceanography and a Master's degree in Oceanography and Meteorology, as well as National Security and Strategic Studies. Long operational career, both ashore and afloat, time over in England in partnership programs. He's got everything he needs to give you everything you needed to know about the oceans and the environment. Ladies and gentlemen, Admiral Ron Perret.
Well, Joe, that introduction was a lot longer than you and I had negotiated as well. So, hey, I do appreciate the opportunity to speak here today, and I do want to take a moment to show my appreciation to AFC International and the Naval Institute for putting this on. Certainly, this is my second year here, and really, I find it just fascinating. Not only the conversations that we've had in the past, but to see the growth and the interest in the things that we are doing in information warfare here today. So it's great to see so many familiar faces, and I've met a number of new friends. I know that we're going to figure out how we can solve some common challenges together. As Joe mentioned, I am a native of California, and certainly San Diego holds a special place for me. This is also where my naval career started, my very first tour, so it's great to come back to a place that I consider home as well. But what we're here to talk about today is naval meteorology and oceanography, and our element or our contribution to the information warfare enterprise. And I think it can go without saying, but I'm going to say it. Naval oceanography is about national security. We take our understanding of the battle space and the environment, we apply that to maritime warfare in all domains to ensure that we can improve the access, maneuverability, and the lethality of the fleet. And we've been doing that for nearly 200 years. We were established with the Depot of Charts and Instruments back in 1830, and it was really trying to figure out how do we utilize our nation's maritime assets and our fleets most effectively? How do we get around the globe to protect the nation's interests as well as our allies and partners? So we have certainly been busy. As you can see here on the slide this is just 2022. This represents the very hard work of nearly 2,500 plus sailors and civilians that are distributed at 60 locations around the globe among 14 different commands. A lot going on, and I'm very proud of it. And our team is really committed to supporting those who are on, above, and below the sea. And we do this by ensuring the readiness of our ever agile and highly effective force. And we got to make sure, we're very conscious of, hey, where are we keeping pace? Where do we think we're falling behind any potential adversary? And what does that do in the risk space with the fleet maneuvers? We're also very focused on advancing our capabilities in unmanned systems. What are we doing with sensors and collecting data and the various types that we utilize, as well as how do we continue to evolve and improve our high-performance computing capabilities when we are dealing with what is now known as big data analytics. So I always pick on if I've got skippers in the room, and I see a couple out here. So later this afternoon, Captain Montgomery and Captain Hermsdorfer will be participating. TD Ladner, are you here? Are you working over in the pavilion? All right, he's still working. Anyway, those three leaders will be upstairs having a discussion about what we do. But if you have an opportunity to go into the IW pavilion later, those leaders will be there, and you can ask them the really hard questions as well. But we're also working hard as an IW enterprise to align and integrate across all of our capabilities, not only within the Navy, but also within the joint services as well, with understanding how do we best defend our joint force and advance the interests of our nation. And finally, we're really looking at how do we enable mission partners and how do we continue to develop our allies across the globe and their capabilities. I think in this past year, it has been readily apparent that everybody takes their sovereignty seriously, right? And we can't take it for granted. And certainly in my own travels, my partnerships have broadened and they have deepened over this past year in that interest. So at sea, we are the subject matter experts that characterize the environment that protect our naval forces. And that's why the Navy needs meteorology and oceanography and information warfare to understand that battle space, to predict, to analyze, and then transform that understanding of the environment into a decision space. And it's in identifying those high grounds that really ensures that our fleet commanders understand, I think as Admiral Ashbeck really put it succinctly, is how can they set the table, right? How can a fleet commander best understand what risk is out there? How should they be deploying their forces, platform selection, what's the right weapon for a particular operation, what's the risk or counter detection in that area? That's all information warfare, really understanding the battle space, and it's the difference between really, frankly, playing chess or playing checkers. And so with that understanding, we can seek opportunities where perhaps an adversary may only see risk as well. So as I stated, it's 2,500 people on the team deployed all over that are really guaranteeing that decision space for the combatant commanders and fleet commanders. And our area of responsibility and operation really starts at the ocean floor and it ends in the stars, and we map everything in between. So why should you bet on naval oceanography? Well, I think as we were talking about earlier, and I've had a number of sidebars, really there's not a ship that sails, a submarine that puts to sea, an aircraft that takes flight, that we aren't with them. And it's not just about safety of our sailors and our fleet, but again, it's in the application of what we do as a fleet. And I think it's AFCEA certainly has demonstrated that we are critical to fleet operations, the successful application of that, and that understanding the ocean, not only for our Navy but the nation, has never been more important, right? With regards to about 70% of the world's population lives near the coastline, 90% of world trade travels upon the maritime commons, and of course in the information age, 90% of intercontinental communications is on the cables that run along the seabed as well. And this year's theme is truly appropriate, and it's about us being committed to seeing if we can take advantage of new capabilities to meet today's challenges as well as tomorrow's. And certainly we've been looking at how do we apply technologies such as unmanned systems, artificial intelligence, machine learning. How do we apply that then to taking information from large amounts of disparate types, right? 100 million plus observations we collect from the ocean and atmosphere daily, over 7 terabytes of data. How do we assimilate that, put that into our predictive models that then our experts then provide a forecast, understanding risk and operation execution as well. And so for tomorrow's challenges, we're working with government, academia, and industry, and I'm glad to see so many represented here out on the floor on what's the next best thing to get after the challenges. And it's really, you never know. I was just having a conversation just before where we actually met a group of folks who have already solved the problem that we've been contemplating. And that's really quite exciting for us. There's really no substitution for this face-to-face interaction, so hopefully you all are taking advantage of it as we are in terms of understanding each of our capabilities and our challenges and figuring out what we can do on behalf of our nation. And I think that's really well articulated in the National Defense Strategy, and that the department must align its priorities to a changing and dynamic threat landscape. So to accomplish these priorities and remain ahead of competitors, naval oceanography has to be the go-to source for assured information. So this is one of the things that I talk about quite often. Certainly in the information age, there is no shortage of information. But where does it come from? How does it get to me? How do I check its veracity? Right? So these are things that we need to understand. So when we need to train like we fight. Because if we get into a conflict, we need to know that the information that we have at our hands is the truth, is the ground truth, and we need to get it to the point of need as well. And that, whether that's in the South China Sea or the Black Sea, the 2,500 sailors and civilians are working on these problems daily in order to provide not only fleet commanders and combatant commanders, but also policy leaders the very best information to inform how do we face these challenges. So what have we done this year? This is a little bit of a report card for us, just so you can see. This is activity, not necessarily what we turn into, I phrase as actionable outcomes. But this gives you just an idea of the level of effort to collect data, assimilate it, turn it into a predictive space, provide a forecast with operational experience that then turns into a decision space in the end. That's what we're in the business of doing. And if we can close that timeline from collection to decision, then we can outpace our competitors. So here in 2022, you can see that our survey ships that we call tags have surveyed over 200,000 nautical miles. That's surveying, that's just not transit. We've deployed over 500 unmanned systems of various types, and those have surveyed or traveled 60,000 nautical miles. And we're owner and operators for nearly 2 decades in unmanned systems. And we've been doing that with full ocean depth, from 6,000 meter vehicles all the way to surface or aerial as well in unmanned systems. But the thing that we do that I'm not sure everyone who's in the unmanned systems operation area is that we take our environmental modeling and prediction and we feed that back in to our command and control of those systems to optimize them. And also to inform the selection of what type of unmanned system that we use. Because if I can do it for less money and get a better result, then I'm also achieving the operational end, and I'm a good steward at the same time. Certainly, our partnership with the Defense Supercomputing Resource Center that maybe I've talked about before that you've heard, they've now supplying to us over 90,000 supercomputing cores. And just this past year, on behalf of Naval Oceanography and the Navy, 3.3 billion core hours provided to us to run our high-end cutting-edge models, atmospheric and ocean as well. As Joe mentioned, the Naval Observatory, that's assured position, navigation, and timing. So how you got here today, if you used your phone, guess what? Naval Oceanography was right there with you all along every step of the way. And they calculated the time it took you to get here too. So hopefully that was accurate. We really appreciate Apple and Google and all them carrying our product, if you will, with them. But that's the Naval Observatory and those scientists delivering that to you, as well as their observations on Earth orientation, as well as what they provide into GPS and assure that for the nation. And we do that in partnership with NIST as well, who are great partners. And lastly, but certainly not least, the number of forecasts that we provided to the fleet in the thousands, well over 200,000, as well as weather and climate reports. So I appreciate you letting me highlight the hard work that the sailors and civilians are doing for Naval Oceanography and the fleet. But this is their report card to you. So when we're thinking about unmanned systems, we move it into models and then onto application. We are constantly collecting as many observations as we possibly can. If you've ever spent any time with a scientist and you ask them, how much data do you need? The answer is more, right? It's always more. Okay, got it, more. So one of the things that we're trying to do then is if we can proliferate the appropriate types of unmanned systems, how do we fill in those gaps out at sea that is data sparse comparatively when you're looking at terrestrial or terrain-based, CONUS-based, land-based, if you will, observation systems. So we're looking at remote sensing capabilities and unmanned systems that go undersea as well as float, if you will. Because that's really fundamental to ensuring that our models and our predictions really have the best conditions to initialize and deliver a value to the fleet. And really these models, we do take a lot of pride in. They represent a long-term effort as well as partnerships with many organizations to include ONR and the Naval Research Laboratory. And certainly, I'll go back again to our partnership with the DSRC as well, in enabling us to provide short and long-term forecasts in the atmosphere, the oceans, ice, waves, the surf, you name it. We can predict it, and we do it at every classification level. And this really leads to the most important part of our mission, and that's transforming that true state of the environment into a decision. How do we employ our fleet? And these forecasts that we generate really are only matched by the expertise that we apply to them. They're not a forecast until you have the human on the loop, if you will. We do rely heavily, we take a lot of pride in the predictive outputs of our models, but it's really the application and understanding of maritime warfare, both from our civilians and our sailors, that really delivers information warfare to the fleet. And this is how we provide those recommendations to the fleet, on options, courses of action, sensor employment, asset allocation, timing, and how do we quantify risk. All right, is this mission a good idea, right? Do we have the appropriate capabilities, or do we need to select a different time and a different location to engage? And I think that's important. Do we provide our fleet commanders, our combatant commanders, an understanding where they can choose engagement in a time and place of our own choosing? And it's about providing that decisive advantage to our Navy and to our DoD partners, that they understand what that environment's going to be and how do we understand it better than anyone else. So I'll just close here. I want to leave time for questions. I hope you have some hard ones because I've got some folks I can call out into the fleet. But I want to highlight here just how important partnerships are to information warfare in naval oceanography. And I wish we could fit everybody on there. So we had to carve out a little space for you, right? Because there's always room for more partners here, and we can't do it alone. So if you heard a challenge in my presentation today, look forward to having a conversation and for the opportunity to share what we are doing in naval oceanography and our priorities. And if you haven't had the opportunity yet, right behind us is the IW Pavilion, and on the corner you'll find the Naval Oceanography team, and our sailors and civilians are there, and be happy to answer any questions that you have that perhaps I can't answer. So I'll pause there, and I'll stand by for your questions. Okay. Well, gosh. Oh, okay. Usually, if we wait for a few minutes, there's the brave soul.
I figure somebody
thank you.
needs to, right, sir? Bob Wells, Dev Technology Group. I'm just curious. You mentioned AIML for predictive analysis. Are you engaging with the CDAO at all on looking for tools that are out there that are available from the commercial space?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. And for those of you who didn't hear it, with the CDAO, right, and that's been not quite a year yet that they've had that title with that. We are continuing that conversation. Right now, Naval Oceanography has about 18 separate efforts that we are really pursuing in the application of artificial intelligence and machine learning. And we have a number of more mature efforts and some that are nascent. So the answer to that is yes, we are, but we need to do more. And some of the things that I've learned, and perhaps you all have as well, is really that there are a lot of folks who are getting at very similar problem sets that we don't actually have to relearn. But it's really about the encoding and the decoding, if you will, with regards to perhaps a specific AI application with that. And so that's what we're trying to get out there and have conversations like we're having right now. Do we understand each other's problem sets? And has this already been approached, or is somebody working on it so that we as a DoD, team can accelerate? And that's what we're trying to do underneath that as well. Hopefully that answers. I think, sir, did you had a question?
How you doing, Admiral? Good seeing you, JC, with NetApp.
I'm sorry, sir, I can't.
I'm sorry, JC with NetApp Corporation. A couple of things. One, how, as much as you can say, how much have you guys been involved in with all these balloon trackings and all that sort of stuff? Weather always plays a big role in that. And then the second piece of that, with all the undersea vehicles and things like that, are you seeing an increased demand signal for undersea warfare models and things like that as far as current oceanography and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, thank you for the question. If you didn't hear, the question is kind of centered on involvement with HABs, as well as the proliferation of unmanned systems in application in seabed warfare or undersea warfare. So I'm looking at my two skippers here who've been involved in both of that. So the answer is absolutely. And we've been involved with helping Nav North and Northcom with regards to once these objects are identified, where do we think they will go? And applying our atmospheric environmental modeling with that as well. And then after the decisions the administration has made with regards to accelerating their use of gravity, if you will, the Naval Oceanographic Office and USNS Pathfinder were involved in surveying off the Carolina coast for that recovery effort as well. When it comes into the proliferation or use of unmanned systems, we have been involved from the very beginning. As I stated, we have been operating our own vehicles for nearly 20 years, and again, full spectrum and ocean depth. And so it's really been quite gratifying to work with other partners across the fleets and how they are applying unmanned systems in their area of operations and their line of efforts, so that we as a Navy, can continue to move forward and not relearn the same lessons now. So I was asked earlier in terms of Task Force 59 and our involvement there. We have certainly been offering our understanding of how do we apply environmental sensing and modeling and how we command and control unmanned vessels. But the other aspect of that is all of this data that unmanned systems collects, right? That amount of data is continuing to grow. Thankfully, our computing power is too. But what's really important there is understanding how do you collect data? To what standard should it be collected given the uses that may be beyond its initial collection intent, right? The appropriate architecture so that it can be shared by multiple organizations, and then the application of AI or AI conditioning. So what I've also learned there is that is not inexpensive. So if we can do that on the front end of data collection, then we will be better off as a nation and a Department of Defense as we work to look at our historical collections, if you will, and data holdings that are very vast, and then decide, hey, which parts of that, because this is what I'm interested in too, is how do we use machine learning and AI to look at our existing data sets and access what's relevant and identify it that way. And so when we get to the decision part of the operation execution, as well as how do we prevent cognitive overload for those folks who are involved, say if it's kinetic or posturing, so that they know what is relevant and what is not. with that. So I answered a little more than your question, just because I'm excited about where we're going and the thoughtful approach that we're taking as a Navy. Thank you for that.
Hello. I was just wondering, I know your main mission is to support the warfare and inform the Navy, but does any of your information get back to the public in general so that they can use, like, or is there a route for that, or is it all just contained within the Navy mission?
Okay, if I understood, is our information available to the public? If we can share it, we do share it. But we also are cognizant that there are other government agencies that have responsibilities as well. So I had the pleasure of sharing a stage with Dr. Spinrad yesterday, who is the Under Secretary in Commerce and the head administrator for NOAA. And so I just provide that as an example of where, when we look at model development, we share data and observations with each other. We look at how we develop our communication pipeline so that we can move data back and forth, so that we can not only look after the interests of the Navy, if you will, within those roles and responsibilities, but also the interests of the nation. So one example of that partnership is that we, every year prior to hurricane season, we collectively put together a sensing plan for the Gulf Coast and the East Coast and put out unmanned systems that will help inform our modeling efforts there, particularly when you're thinking about storm intensification. So that's one area. And certainly we've talked about time, right? And we share that freely as well. Thank you. Hopefully that answers that. All right. You guys really warmed the crowd up now. All right, you guys are.
Thank you, Admiral. Tim Miller with ProSync Technology Group. Curious if there's anything new and or different if you were King for a day, you'd like to see out of the Knights portfolio of tools. Anything come to mind?
Well, I don't know. Yeah. Hey, Captain Hermsdorfer, do you want to answer that?
Sorry to put anyone else on the spot here.
Yeah, hi sir. I think, I'm the CEO of the Fleet Weather Center, so it's largely the sailors and officers who work at my command, and then the units that fall underneath us that are out afloat that use the Knights program very heavily. And the number one thing that I would like to see is an integrated forecaster toolkit that is the same that you use both at sea and ashore. That frees up so much time in the training pipeline and in people's ability to really understand how to use the tool and get the most capability that they can out of it, and that translates from tour to tour. And that I really think allows them to have more time back to hone their skill and to provide the most benefit out to the fleet.
Thank you. Hopefully that's not the last time you attend one of my talks, So I appreciate Captain Hermsdorfer kind of stepping in, and the reason she's in my line of sight, of course, but we had this conversation just yesterday. And we're thinking about, because really our most precious resource are our people, and how do we use their time? The tools that we give them so they can apply the value and the expertise most effectively with that. So we're very sensitive to, when we get into a partnership, develop a capability, how is that integrated? How do we train and operate ashore so that when we're at sea, we're not having to learn something completely different in that application? And I think that understanding that integration from ashore operational units to the afloat units that they support, that needs to be seamless, and we're continuing to improve that. So thank you for that question and for the team participation there. All right.
Hey, good morning, Admiral. I'm Chief Warrant Officer Lester up at 1st Intel Battalion, METOC officer. I had a quick question about the Navy's vision for coastal sensing and kind of sensing the littorals a lot better than we currently are, and also I would say modeling the coastline a little bit better for forecasts. I know we have Delft 3D. Is that integrated into our models now? WaveWatch 3 is kind of not working out for us too well. but we're looking at getting more precise sensing in the surf zone. We're also looking at better modeling capabilities. We all know the dynamics of the coastline and how important it is for us to get that right. So significant wave height outside of an observer going out and looking. I'm looking for like a sensing capability. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thanks. I'm not sure if Captain Montgomery's making eye contact with me or not right now, but so the answer, I think the first part that we need to understand, right, is a model is only as good as how it's initialized. So one of the things that we need to do better, particularly in the littoral zones, right, is how do we place sensors there that can survive that environment? Frankly, it's a highly dynamic and very complex. And those are really two different issues with that. So there's two things there. We're working on the type of sensors that we can leave unattended. Frankly, can we drop them into the areas of need and not have to get them back? So that that's a cost point issue. How can we deploy them by aerial or other means? Unmanned systems in the littoral zone, when it gets shallow and the wave dynamics, if you can get that back, and really, how do you get that data out, right? That's the other aspect of it in information war. How do we get that out in a complex EM environment as well? The second part of that is with regards to better modeling. One of the things I haven't really talked about, but we really took a leap a couple years ago and doubled down on a new model that we refer to as Neptune. And that is really looking at dramatically improved physics that will allow us to scale differently in a global model, but really down to the 8 and 9 kilometer range. Then that will help then, I think, better initialize the mesoscale, if you will. So how'd I do? Is that, yeah, okay, I got the thumbs up in terms of, that vision that we're working towards with a lot of effort there, because we understand, again, the Navy Marine mission, going across the beach in the littoral zones ultimately is the tip of the spear. Yeah, thanks.
That's it. Last call.
All right. Well, okay, it looks like this is the most satisfied group of individuals at AFCEA. I appreciate that. I just want to thank you for your time and your attention this morning. I really do take a lot of pride in representing naval oceanography and all the experts ashore and afloat and what we provide to the fight and our part in information warfare. Again, I will extol you to spend some time in our booth and talk with some of our experts. If you didn't get your question answered or it was a little more detailed than you wanted to provide here, we can answer it over there in the IW Pavilion. So again, thank you, and I wish you all to enjoy the rest of the week.